Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel. You're a host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rural Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. And we're a mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. And, folks, I am so excited about today's guest, and I want to thank you for joining me today. With me today is Samuel J. Kaiser. He is I can't even see if I can pronounce the name of this, theoretical linguist. He is Peter G. Flores Emeritus Professor and Emeritus Member of the Linguistics and Philosophy Faculty and former Associate Provost at MIT. He has authored numerous books and scientific publications and is editor-in-chief of the journal Linguistic Inquiry. He is also a jazz trombone player, a recipient of the Yale Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, a 2025 Wilbur Cross Medal for Alumni Achievement. Jay lives in the Boston area. Jay wrote the book, Play It Again, Sam, Repetition in the Arts, by Samuel J. Kaiser, but he likes to go by Jay. Welcome, Professor J. Kaiser, to Chatting with Betsy.
Thank you so much for having me, Betsy. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you about the book.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you. First, I'm going to ask you, Jay, what motivated you to write this book about repetition in the arts?
There's a number of things. I guess one of the first things is that years ago, with a colleague of mine, my mentor, Morris Halley, we proposed a theory that became known as generative metrics, which was really essentially a field of study that wanted to explore what makes a metrical line metrical. Why is it that a sophisticated reader of poetry, for example, will be able to tell that the line "When to the Sessions of Sweet Silent Thought," which is the first line of Shakespeare's sonnet number 30, and the second line, "I summon up remembrances of things past." Why is it that those two lines are from the same meter, whereas Ode to the West Wind by Percy Bysshe Shelley is not? What is it we know in order to make that judgment, which is an accurate judgment? And I think that that kind of study made me ask a more sort of wide-ranging question. Why meter at all? Why should poets have metrical lines at all? Why should they try to fit the words of English into the Procrustean bed of a meter? So that was something that was always on my mind. And then in 2020, I published a book called The Mental Life of Modernism. And in that book, I had run across a discussion of repetition by Leonard Bernstein, the great composer, conductor, and performer. You can find that discussion in his the book, which was the publication form of his Norton Lecture Series at Harvard University in the early 1970s. And what Bernstein said just really caught me by surprise. He said, the reason why there's been so little progress in music theory is because music theorists have not paid attention to repetition in music. Now, here's something that really caught my attention. Why should Bernstein be complaining about repetition? And here I am thinking about, why do poets use repetition? And then what actually nailed it for me and really turned the corner in my mind the corner that says one street is called Musing About and the other street is called Let's Write About It. And what made me turn the corner from Muse Street to Let's Write About It Street was an experiment performed by a musicologist at Princeton University. Her name is Elizabeth Helmut Margulis, and she put together a remarkably simple but elegant experiment, which really I thought was just caused veils to drop from in front of my eyes. Here's what she did. She took two composers of atonal music, Luciano Berio and Elliott Carter. Now, you don't have to know the difference between tonal and atonal music for me to explain this experiment. So, in the interest of time, let me not to go into that. But let me just say that these... is that okay, Betsy?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So here's what she did. She actually took two pieces by these composers, and using the brute force functions of her computer, one labeled copy and one labeled paste. And what she did was she copied a segment of the music and pasted it later on in the music. And so she did that for both composers. So let's imagine that the music that she was looking at could be divided up into 5 segments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She copied segment number 1. And in one experiment, which she called immediate repetition, she pasted it right after it occurred. So that new doctored piece of music was not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it was now 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then she did the same thing, but she pasted it a little farther down the line in what she called delayed repetition. So that music was now not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it was 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, 5. Okay, so she had 4 pieces of music, 2 the originals and 2 doctored with no aesthetic goal in mind at all, just simply using the brute force capability of the computer. She copied and she pasted. And what she did was she played these 4 pieces of music to 2 groups of people. The first were college students who were not particularly versed in music theory or had any special qualifications in that direction. They just liked music. I mean, they probably listened to all of the latest pop pieces and that sort of thing, the latest stars, Beyonce and so forth, Madonna, Lady Gaga. Okay, so what she did was she asked them which they liked better. Just ask them which one they like better. To a significant degree, the students liked the doctored pieces better. Then what she did was she took the same experiment to a conference where the attendees were all PhDs in music theory. These were people for whom music was their career. They knew it. They knew it all. They certainly knew Luciano Berio, and they certainly knew Elliott Carter. And what she did was she played it for them. And lo and behold, the same result. They liked the doctored piece better. What Margulis concluded was that the mere addition of repetition had enhanced the aesthetic appeal of these pieces of music. It was exactly like a master chef adding a spice to a recipe in order to enhance its flavors. It was as mechanical as that. You build in repetition, you like it better. That made me realize that repetition is not just a fillip, not just something en passant, as they say, but rather this was a rather deep issue about human cognition and what we find pleasurable. And so that's what got me interested in repetition.
You know what, Professor Jay, I'm glad you brought that up, because when reading chapters in your book, and, it just hit me as being part in the neurodivergent community, because my son has a cognitive disability. My husband had early onset Alzheimer's. I worked with children at a preschool. I have found that repetition definitely is comforting, and it does give people pleasure. And I wanted to pick your brain, because is that why young children, they love to hear rhymes over and over again? They love to hear the same songs over and over again. My son, who is neurodivergent, he likes the same things repeated every day, over and over again. It's a sense of comfort to them. Have you noticed that in the neurodivergent community? I have to pick your brain about that.
Well, actually, that's been noticed. That was noticed a long time ago. And I think that given your background and what you just described about your son's disability, I think you'll find this very interesting, and you may even want to research it on your own. But in 1968, there was a social psychologist by the name of Robert Zients who wrote an article in which he described what he called the mere exposure phenomenon. And here's what he said, quote, mere repeated exposure of the individual to a stimulus object enhances the subject's attitude toward it. In other words, it's almost a paraphrase of Elizabeth Margulis's comment about the mere inclusion of repetition. He saw repetition as a kind of safe environment sensor. This has nothing to do with the arts now, and this is very important, Betsy, because what I'm telling you now has to do with fundamental cognitive functioning of Homo sapiens. And he saw repetition as a kind of safe environment sensor, something that is essential for a creature driven to live within a cohesive social organization. In other words, it was a marker which guided the subject to a safe environment. So long as this sensor kept firing, the environment was labeled safe. The glue that makes the label stick to the sense of pleasure it bestows is the glue that makes the label stick is the sense of pleasure. That is to say, if you keep firing something over and over and over again, what happens is you develop an affection for it. This place feels good. Now, he, in the course of his article, Zients referenced work that points to infants going from fear to interest as a sound, frightening on the first hearing, becomes a matter of interest upon repetition. The idea is that we all come with our own hardwired self-monitoring baby monitor. As long as our surroundings register sameness, the odds for survival are in our favor. But as soon as a big enough difference is spotted or you become aware of a big enough difference, an internal version of a warning light begins to flash. Be careful. So you can easily imagine how this might happen. What happens is that an infant, when an infant is born, the first image, or certainly one of the first images that it's going to be exposed to, is its mother's face. And if ever there was an image that the infant ought to bond to enhance its possibility of survival, it's to its mother. And so by the repetitive appearance of that image tells the infant, this is a safe place for me to be. I don't want to fight being here. Okay, so that is an evolutionary development designed to maximize the probability of an infant surviving long enough to contribute to the gene pool. After all, that's nature's only concern. And what my book is about is the claim that this connection between repetition and pleasure, which nature built in order to make sure that the infant survived, was co-opted by artists to make sure that pleasure was installed in their works of art.
Yes, I said, I can't wait to talk to Professor J about this topic because, and especially working with children. I worked with children ages 2.5 to 6, and they love watching the same stories, hearing the same stories, or watching it on we had the VCR at the time, or DVD, but they love rhyming, and they love to hear the rhyming. Yes. Go ahead, Professor J.
And the reason is because it gives them a sense of pleasure.
Yes, and
that means that's where they feel safe.
Yes, I know, it's incredible, and it just boggles my mind sometimes, Professor J, how the brain works, because and it's been proven that music therapy is very beneficial to those who have Alzheimer's or any type of dementia. And when my husband Matt, when he would hear Glenn Campbell's song "Wichita Lineman," and this is in his early stages, he would say, "My dad liked that song, and he was a lineman for our electric company down here, PSE&G. He remembered that for the longest time." And you can, I saw how music really helped him to calm down because it was pleasurable for him to hear that. It's fascinating to me.
Well, I've had the same experience myself. Earlier on in my life, when unfortunately I can no longer walk without aids because of an accident that happened to me about 11 years ago. But before that, I used to play in a Dixieland band that went around to 4 nursing homes in Newburyport. And what we would do is we would go to each of these nursing homes, and we'd go to a place where the staff had assembled the residents to hear us. And I remember distinctly one ward where the residents couldn't leave their beds. They were so enfeebled. And I think that most of them must have had dementia. They were just, when we would come into the ward, there was no interest at all in us. Whatever they were staring at, they continued to stare at it. But as soon as we started to play, the heads lifted up and they turned toward us, and in many of them you could see a smile. It was amazing to me to see that kind of reaction. All that happened was we started playing music.
Yeah, that's so true. I'll tell you what, my father would have loved you, Professor J. My father loved jazz, and you mentioned Duke Ellington and Satin doll. My father loved Duke Ellington. I said, I got to tell that to Professor J. Because it brought back memories. I had to go to YouTube and play that song, Satin doll, because I forgot what it, sounded like. Excuse me. But you brought back memories of my dad, so I want to thank you for bringing back those memories to me. And so you see the importance of repetition. Do you think musicians take that seriously?
Well, I think that they certainly take playing the music seriously, and that's all you need, because the music embodies the repetition, and really good musicians know how to bring out the heart of the music. So the answer is yes. They may not be aware of what they're doing, that namely they are playing a repeated motif. In some cases, the repetition that is built into a piece of music is so complicated that it's unlikely that anybody gets it. But that said, I think that musicians indirectly are aware of it when they play the piece with love.
Yes, I was just, fascinated, and I'm fascinated to hear you discuss your intense knowledge about how important repetition is in the arts. How does that repetition concern the art of painting?
Well,
drawing.
In the chapter 14 of my book is devoted to showing you how repetition works in painting and in photography. And I think in order to bring that out in as clear fashion as possible, if you don't mind, I would like to start not with your question about painting, but I'd like to show you what goes on in poetry, and in particular, that part of poetry which we call rhyme.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay?
Yes,
okay, so
of course.
Consider a couplet like this. I wrote this couplet for the purposes of discussion. Here is a couplet. I am searching for a rhyme to spice this couplet. Let's say time. Now, we know that rhyme and time, there, when I use the word time, I refer to it in terms of the spice, T-H-Y-M-E. But of course, I also want you to think about the word time, T-I-M-E. But we know as soon as we hear that rhyme and time rhyme. We know that rhyme and time rhyme, but that rhyme and foot doesn't.
Right.
We know that rhyme and time rhyme, but we also know that rhyme and rhyme don't rhyme, at least not as end rhymes.
Right,
what is
correct.
What we know? Here's what we know. What we know is we have the ability, and I'm going to greatly simplify this, but I think it's the basic idea. We have the ability to take a word, I'll look only at monosyllables for the moment, and we divide it up into two parts, which I'll call the front and the back. The back part begins with the stressed vowel, and what we know is that a word and the front part is everything before the back part to the beginning of the word. So let's take the word rhyme. The back part is I'm, as in the word I'm going to the store. The back part is I'm. What is the front part? It's are. In the word time, what is the back part? It's I'm. What is the front part? It's T. And what we know is that for a word to rhyme, to be part of a rhyming pair, the back parts must be the same and the front part must be different. That's why rhyme and foot don't rhyme, because in rhyme the back part is I'm, the front part is R, and in foot the back part is ut and the front part is F. Well, it satisfies the front part, which is different, but it doesn't satisfy the back part, which is different, and it's supposed to be the same. So when we determine whether two words rhyme or not, what we do is we say, divide each word into front and back parts. Are the back parts the same? Are the front parts different? If the answer to 2 and 3 is yes, then the words rhyme. Now, this relationship between the front and the back parts, I'm going to call same except. So you can say the two words rhyme if they are the same, except for the front part. Now that same except relationship shows up in music. So, for example, you mentioned that your father was a great devotee of Duke Ellington, and indeed so am I. In fact, I play in a jazz orchestra that is devoted to avant-garde jazz and the works of Duke Ellington. We have a concert coming up on the 9th of September, in fact, here in the Boston area, where we're going to play a good part of it will be the works of Duke Ellington.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, we did a concert at the local public radio station, television station, WGBH, on the 6th of June last year, and that was the 125th year of Duke Ellington's birthday, and it went all over the world, and it was a celebratory concert for Duke, and I'm very proud to say that I played in it, and I'm so pleased that I was able to. Anyway, one of the tunes that Duke wrote, he wrote in 1950 with Billy Strayhorn, called Satin Doll. It was, as you said, one of your your father's favorites, and you went and listened to it again. So you're going to have to listen to it again with me singing it. So I'm going to do a wretched job of it, but let me do that anyway. The interesting thing about that Satin Doll is that it is the musical version of rhyme. It is composed of a melody that is the same except. And let me show you how that works. The first two bars of Satin Doll are ba-boo-da-boo-da, ba-doo-da, and the second two bars are ba-boo-da-boo-da, ba-doo-da. Now those two bars rhyme. They are the same except, but the dimensions along which the rhyme is defined, it being in music, is different. It's not the sounds of words, but rather it's the combination of rhythm and pitch. A musical notation combines into a single notation both how the pitch of a note, that is to say, where it appears along the scale, how high or low it is, and the second thing it encodes is the rhythm. Now let's split those two things apart. And now let me give you the rhythmic version of the first two bars of Satin Doll. It's ba-boo-dop, boo-dop, ba-doo-bop. You'll notice I'm not changing the pitch at all. And what is the rhythm of the second two bars? It's identical. It's the same. Ba-boo-dop, boo-dop, ba-doo-bop. Now let's take a look at the pitch. The pitch of the first bar is ba-boo-dop, ba-boo-dop, boo-dop, ba-doo-dop. The pitch of the second two bars, ba-boo-dop, boo-dop, ba-doo-dop. It's different. And what is the difference? It's one step higher in the scale. So the first four bars of Duke Ellington's Satin Doll and Billy Strayhorn's Satin Doll rhyme. They're the same in rhythm and they are different in pitch, but the rhythm is the pitch is close. So it's the musical version, same except. Now, if you go to the bridge of Satin Doll, the bridge is 8 bars long. It's an interval between the first 8 bars and the last 8 bars of the tune. It's typically called the bridge in jazz. And now listen to the bridge. The first 4 bars are ba 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 doo ba da ba 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 doo ba da ba. Okay. Now let me do the second 4 bars for you. Ba 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 doo ba da ba 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 doo ba da ba. And if you understood what I said about the beginning, you'll see that the bridge is identical. The rhythm of the first 4 bars are the same. The pitch is different. The rhythm of the first 4 bars is the same as the rhythm of the second 4 bars of the bridge. The 4 measures. Let me not be technical. The rhythm of the first 4 measures of the bridge and the rhythm of the second 4 measures of the bridge are identical. They're the same. The pitch of the first 4 measures of the bridge differs from the pitch of the second 4 measures of the bridge by 1 step. Exactly the same thing that we saw in the beginning. The whole tune is built on same except. It is a musical version of rhyme. Now we've looked at poetry and we found same except, and we've looked at music and we found same except. And now let's go to your original question, could I say something about painting? Well, perhaps the most famous painting that everybody there would know might be Andy Warhol's Campbell soup cans.
Yes.
It was a poke in the eye of abstract expressionism, which was Warhol did this in 1962, and at that time, abstract expressionism in the hands of painters like de Kooning and Jackson Pollock were all the rage, and Andy Warhol made fun of it. Rather than be abstract, he wanted to be as concrete as possible, and in fact as mundane as possible. So what did he do? He actually painted a can, the most common thing you could think of. It was an item that you could find in any supermarket or corner grocery store, a can of Campbell soup. And he painted 32 of them. They were all the same. And what he did was he arranged them on the wall in 4 rows of eight cans each. So you had 8 cans, and then underneath that, 8 cans, and underneath that, 8 cans, and underneath that, the last 8 cans. 32 cans. Every one of them absolutely identical, except there was one difference. Can you guess what the difference would be, Betsy?
The flavor?
Exactly. Every can was the same except for the label. The first row was clam chowder, and then followed by chicken noodle, and then followed by cream of vegetable, onion, green pea, scotch broth, vegetable, split pea. That's just the first row. The cans were the same except. Exactly the same principle that we saw in Duke Ellington's Satin Doll, exactly the same principle that we saw in Endrain in a couplet like, I am searching for a rhyme to spice this couplet, let's say time. All right. In photography, there is a woman by the name of Ronnie Horn, who I believe is stationed is based in New York City, although she photographs all over the world. One of her most famous collection of photographs she made after spending a year, I think, in Iceland. And the result of that was something called Becoming a Landscape. And in that book, what she has is 100 pictures of faces. But these faces are in pairs, just like Endrain, and just like the first 4 bars of Satin Doll. And if you look at these faces, it's as if they're identical. It's as if she simply had somebody pose and then click the camera twice. But that's not quite true. If you look at it, you will see that there's very slight differences in between the 2 portraits. As one commentator on the web put it, he said, Horn requires that you look and discover the identity is always different. That is to say, these photographs are the same except. It's as if she has taken the game, Spot the Difference, and turned it into an art form. Do you know what Spot the Difference is?
Noticing differences in the portrait or the painting, I would think.
But there was a children's game, called Spot the Difference, where you would there'd be 2 pictures and they'd be identical on first glance. But what you would know is that they're really differences, and the fun was to spot the difference. And so you kept going back, and that was fun. The reason why it was a game is because it was fun. And the reason why it was fun was because it demanded repetition. Well, she did that in her photographs. So that's the answer to your question about what's going on in photography.
Well, that's very interesting. I'm visually impaired, Professor J, so when you have to look at a picture and spot the difference, sometimes first I can't do it, and then I got to go back, give repetition, go back and keep looking at the difference, and then I eventually do see the differences in the photographs. But I just really I have to tell you this too. My dad, who also had Alzheimer's, was in a nursing home facility. My mom brought all his jazz records there, and when he got a little feisty, they would play his music, which calmed him down. And so when I was listening to Duke Ellington, and of course I had to go to Sarah Vaughan, who he liked, and Ella Fitzgerald, and Billie Holiday, and it just brings back memories. So repetition also, to me, Professor Jay, and this might sound a little off, repetition to me is also comforting because it brings back precious memories.
Well,
do you find that? Yeah.
Well, I think the answer to that is yes. I definitely do find that. I mean, if that's a kind of a secondary phenomenon, the repetition itself is taking pleasure in it is, I'm saying, hardwired into us as human beings. But that gives rise to pleasant memories, and you remember those pleasant memories when you think of the repetition. So sure, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you have those memories.
Thank you. Me too. I don't know if you have the time, Professor Jay, but can you tell us how did you get into theoretical? Am I saying that right? Linguistics. You can tell I'm not a linguist. Can you tell us what that is and how did you get interested in that?
When I was a student in undergraduate days, I studied, I was always very drawn toward literature. I just like to read. I like to read novels. I like to read short stories. I like to read poetry and essays. It was just that's just who I am. And so I thought to myself, well, I think what I'll do is I'll maybe make a career out of studying literature. And so I began to look at what people who studied literature did. And what I found was that for the most part, what they did was they would pick a period, they would pick poets or writers that they liked very much, and then they would analyze the reasons why they liked them. And I found that for the most part, their commentaries, although they were interesting, they were really not what I would call hard and fast arguments. They were not scientific arguments at all. What they were sort of the evocations. They were elegant descriptions of the evocations that a work of art produced in a particular reader. And as interesting as that might be, depending upon the mind of the critic involved, it really wasn't formal, because somebody else could read the same poem and come up with a completely different interpretation, and that would be just as good. So I wasn't satisfied with English literature as a career, because, as I said, I was much more interested in the scientific study of literature, if that was indeed possible. And that led me to through various steps into theoretical linguistics. First, I went to Oxford, where I studied Old and Middle English. I did that in order to sort of broaden my range of knowledge about English literature. I read Chaucer, I read Beowulf, and I read a lot of the Middle English poetry like Gawain in the Green Knight, and also The Owl and the Nightingale. By the way, Gawain in the Green Knight is an absolutely brilliant poem, which unfortunately is lost to us, many of us, because it was written in Middle English, and it does take some effort to read it, but it's just a brilliant poem in our earlier stages of our language. Well, anyway, once I had done that, I decided, well, maybe I can marry my knowledge of linguistics with my knowledge of, my knowledge of literature with the study of language as a formal object. So I got a scholarship to Yale, and I went to Yale, got my PhD in linguistics at Yale. And in the course of doing that, I was introduced to the work of Noam Chomsky and Morris Halle at MIT. And that was basically groundbreaking work which shifted the study of language onto a whole new level, on a par with scientific inquiry. It is, in fact, the basis of the scientific study of the brain. At the moment, it's linguistic accounts of what it is we know when we know a language is probably the most thoroughly articulated theory of what the brain knows when it knows how to speak. And over the course of a professional lifetime, I spent most of my life writing in topics having to do with theoretical linguistic subjects. I wrote on syllable structure in English and in the world's languages, and then with a colleague of mine, Nick Clements, long gone but not forgotten. And I worked on the syntax of a lexicon with another colleague, Ken Hale, who is one of the most brilliant linguists I've ever encountered in my life. And then I retired. And when I retired, I realized I'm free. I can do whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the first time in my life, I was able to marry my interest in theoretical linguistics with my interest in art. And my two books, Mental Life of Modernism and now Played Against Sam, was the result of that. That was the result of a life of retirement.
Well, Professor Samuel J. Kaiser, I so enjoyed talking to you today. I know you have to go, but I enjoyed talking to you, and I want to know where can people purchase your book, Played Against Sam, Repetition in the Arts?
Well, you can get it on, I know you can get it on Amazon. I'm sure you can request it in your local bookstore. And I think you can also get it in libraries. But I also think it's available online from MIT Press. You might want to take a look at their open access, so direct publication offerings. And I think my book is there, so you can have access to it there.
And how can people connect with you, Jay?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and I think that you can get my contact information there. I have received 2 or 3 emails about my various exposures to the public. I found each one of these emails really interesting, so I benefit greatly from that. But you can get me through Facebook.
Oh, cool. You know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that myself. I'm going to connect with you on Facebook. Thank you so much, Professor Samuel J. Kaiser. I'm going to spell the last name, Keyser. You heard today, folks. Thank you for writing your book, Played Against Sam, Repetition in the Arts. I found it very interesting. I'll have to go back and read what I didn't finish reading. But thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, writing your book, and your career, playing music in different facilities and sharing your talents. It was such a pleasure and honor to talk to you today, Jay. Thank you so much.
You're very kind to say those kind things to me. Thank you so much. I also want to thank you for making your time available to me. And if you have any questions, just email me.
Sure. Thank you so much. Folks, you heard Professor Samuel J. Kaiser, author and writer, Played Against Sam, Repetition in the Arts. I highly recommend for people to read that, especially if you were in, I'm going to say, the educational field, medical field, any kind of field. Read this book. It will really enlighten you. And I think it's very important for people who are going into education to read this book. And all the information about Samuel J. Kaiser will be in the blog that Jeannie White writes, who is the station manager and produces the show. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO at Passion World Talk Radio Network, who makes this all possible. And I want to thank Lisa Warren PR, of arranging this interview. She is a wonderful publicist. So if you need a publicist, you're an author, writer, I highly recommend Lisa Warren. And I want to thank you all for listening. Please subscribe to Chatting with Betsy. It is for free if you haven't already. I am on Spotify, Spreaker, iHeart, Amazon Music, to name a few. And I want to reach as many people as possible. And I also want to thank you all for listening to me. You can even program me on Alexa if you have Alexa, Chatting with Betsy. And you can take me wherever you do. You know, you're walking, doing dishes, you know, whatever, you can listen to Chatting with Betsy. And I would so appreciate that. Also, if you want to follow me, I am on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Bye-bye now.